My name is Sophia Bennett. I'm 3D Simv. And up until recently, I still believed that family meant something, that blood would always matter. That illusion shattered on an ordinary Friday night. Over candlelight, homemade stew, and a carefully staged smile from the woman who gave birth to me. My mother's voice had been unusually warm when she called 2 weeks earlier, inviting me back to our family home in Sacramento for dinner. "It's been too long, sweetheart," she said. He hesitated. For over a decade, I had been the one extending myself financially, emotionally, practically, while my family took. They never called unless they needed something. And yet, despite everything, some naive part of me still held on to the hope that maybe this time they missed me. Maybe this time I was coming home to love. So I drove from my condo in San Francisco back to the house I helped save from foreclosure. A house I paid the mortgage on for years while working 60-hour weeks building my business from the ground up. I arrived early, my suitcase still in the trunk, dressed in a blazer and heels straight from a client pitch. The air smelled of garlic and rosemary. The lights were warm, and the dining table glowed with carefully placed candles. Olivia, my younger sister, twirled her freshly blown-out hair between her fingers, a barely concealed smirk on her face. Parker, my brother, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, smug as ever. Our parents sat at either end of the table like a courtroom jury. Something about the setup felt rehearsed. I ignored the chill crawling up my spine and smiled. My mistake? It didn't take long. Not even 5 minutes after I'd sat down and taken a polite spoonful of stew, Parker cleared his throat. "To avoid any misunderstandings," he said, voice syrupy and slow, "Mom and Dad wanted me to let you know their will is finalized. The house, the lake villa in Tahoe, the accounts. Everything is going to Olivia and me." I froze. At first, I thought it was a joke. My laugh came out short, confused. But no one else was laughing. My fork clinked against my plate. What I managed. My mother smiled, as if this were a casual update and not a betrayal. "Sophia, you're stable. You have your company. You have your own house. Parker and Olivia, they need the support." I looked to my father, praying he'd shake his head and say this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But he just stared into his wineglass like a coward. Parker shrugged with mock innocence. "I mean, you're doing great. Meanwhile, I'm still trying to finish my degree. And Olivia's figuring things out. It's only fair." Olivia rolled her eyes, adding, "You don't need anything. You've always had your act together." That was the moment I understood. They weren't just redistributing assets. They were erasing me. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Support Olivia. You haven't held a job for more than 6 months. Parker, you've changed majors 5 times and burned through 3 universities worth of tuition. Guess who paid for all of that?" My mother's expression hardened. "Sophia, there's no need to list everything you've done. That's not what family is about." "No," I asked. "Then what is family about, because I've paid over $40? Oh, 0 for the Tahoe renovations. I've covered utilities here for years. I invested in you because I believed in us. And now I'm being told I don't deserve a cent." Olivia scoffed. "Wow. You've really been keeping track. How generous of you." Her condescension hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just ignorance. It was entitlement. No. Olivia, I said, voice low, trembling with fury. This isn't about generosity. It's about betrayal. That word hung in the air like a dagger. My mother slammed her hand on the table so hard the glasses shook. Enough. Sophia, we're not doing this. You're not a victim. Stop acting like money is all you care about. The irony nearly made me choke. All I care about, I put my dreams on hold to help this family. I passed on buying a bigger house. Delayed vacations. Skipped investments because you needed me. And now that you think I'm done being useful, I'm disposable. Parker rolled his eyes. God. Sophia. You sound like a child. Grow up. And there it was again, that dismissive tone. That quiet consensus that I was the problem. Simply because I was no longer willing to carry them. I looked at each of them. One by one. My father. Silent as ever. My mother. Cold and manipulative. Parker. Smug and spineless. Olivia. Petty and cruel. And it dawned on me they didn't see me as family. I was a wallet with a pulse. An ATM that occasionally showed up for Thanksgiving. A cold calm settled over me. I pushed back from the table. The chair scraping sharply against the floor. You know what I said. Voice steady. Terrifyingly quiet. I've heard enough. My mother narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said, looking her dead in the eye. I'm done. You want to cut me out of your legacy? Fine. I'm cutting you out of my life. Parker scoffed. You're going to walk away over a will. No. I said. I'm walking away because for the first time, I finally see this for what it is. You never loved me. You loved what I could give you. I walked toward the door. Heart pounding. If you leave, don't expect to come back. My mother hissed behind me. I paused at the threshold, turned slightly, and said, I never truly felt welcome here anyway. Then I left. I drove through the dark streets. Headlights illuminating road signs I barely read. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. From rage. From clarity. I had given everything for a family who would never give me a damn thing in return. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew this: they had underestimated me. And that was their first mistake. The silence after cutting them off was almost unsettling. For the first time in years, my phone didn't ring with requests for money, emergency wires, or veiled guilt trips disguised as catch-up calls. I drove back to San Francisco with my jaw clenched so tight it ached, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing grounding me. My mind kept replaying every look, every word, every smirk at that table. The betrayal wasn't new, it had been happening in increments for years, but something about that dinner made it undeniable. I was no longer angry. I was awakened. As soon as I got home, I opened my banking app. eBay. That was what I was still auto-paying monthly for their lives, $1. $500 for the mortgage. $600 for utilities. Plus all the little transactions that added up: birthday gifts, maintenance bills, Olivia's streaming subscriptions, Parker's gym membership I was still covering for some reason. I scrolled through the charges with growing disgust. With one flick of my thumb, I canceled every recurring payment. The screen flashed successfully cancelled. And for the first time in a decade, I felt something I couldn't quite name. Relief, rage, closure. Maybe all of it. I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down. The chains were off. But I knew better than to think they'd stay quiet. The calls began the next morning. My mother first. I didn't answer. Then Olivia. Then my father. Then Parker. 5 missed calls in 1 hour. By the time I'd finished my coffee, there were voicemails waiting. I pressed play out of morbid curiosity. My mother's voice came through first. Shrill and accusatory. Sophia. What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just cancel everything like this. We have bills. This house doesn't run on air. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask why. She just demanded. My father's voice followed. Slower. More measured. Sophia, sweetheart. I know you're upset. But this is too much. Can we talk? Don't let this blow up the family. And then Olivia. Her voice was venomous. You're so damn petty. You wait until you don't get what you want. Then pull the plug. You're pathetic. Finally, Parker, hope you're proud. You're about to ruin everything. Just remember you started this. I deleted them all without a second thought. They weren't trying to apologize. They were trying to regain control. But I wasn't theirs anymore. That weekend, the messages started coming in from extended family. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. Aunt Susan Sophia. I'm heartbroken. Your parents have always done everything for you. Why are you turning on them? Cousin, Rachel, cutting off your parents. Really, after all, they sacrificed. I could almost see my mother orchestrating it like a symphony. Spinning the narrative behind the scenes. In her version, I was the greedy, ungrateful daughter who had turned on her poor, aging parents. What they conveniently left out was that I had covered their mortgage when they were months from foreclosure, paid off Parker's student loans, and bankrolled Olivia's failed attempt at becoming a fashion influencer. For 10 years, I had funded their lifestyles while sacrificing my own. They weren't victims. They were parasites. Still, the guilt creeped in like smoke under a door. I had spent so long being the reliable one, the good one, the financial backbone of the family. That part of me still flinched at the idea of not being needed. But need wasn't love. And love wasn't supposed to look like this. 3 days later, I received a text from my father. We're having a family meeting. Friday. 7 p.m. Come home. No question mark. No please. Just an order. I stared at the screen for a full minute. I could ignore it. I should have. But some twisted part of me still wanted to believe they might change. I might admit what they did. So, I replied, fine. When I pulled into the driveway that Friday, Parker's BMW was parked perfectly beside Olivia's ridiculous pink Mini Cooper. The porch light flicked on the second I stepped out of the car. My mother opened the door with a tight, calculated smile. Sophia. So glad you came. I said nothing. Inside, the house looked the same. But it felt wrong, airless. Too clean. Like a crime scene after it's been scrubbed. My father was already seated. Hands folded. Eyes serious. Olivia and Parker were on the couch, postured like royalty awaiting an apology. I sat across from them. Arms crossed. Expression unreadable. Let's get to it, I said. My father cleared his throat. We want to resolve this tension. I let out a laugh so sharp it could cut glass. You mean the tension that began when you told me I was nothing but a walking bank account? My mother raised a hand like I was an unruly student. Sophia. Don't be dramatic. We just thought, no. I interrupted. You didn't think. Or maybe you did. Maybe you planned it. Maybe you knew exactly what you were doing when you invited me to that dinner. Parker leaned forward, scowling. You didn't have to cut us off. That was extreme. Extreme, I hissed. You took $500,000 from me over 10 years. And I never once asked for recognition. But the moment I question your greed, I'm cut out like trash. Olivia rolled her eyes. God. You're obsessed with money. No, I replied. I'm obsessed with fairness. Something none of you seem to understand. My mother stood abruptly, her voice rising. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said quietly, but with a force that silenced the room. This family tore itself apart the moment you decided I wasn't one of you. I stood to leave, chest tight, fury simmering just beneath the surface. I came here hoping stupidly that maybe one of you would say sorry. That maybe you'd realize how deeply you've hurt me. But now I know. You don't feel guilt. You feel entitlement. I turned to the door. But Olivia's voice followed me like a dagger. You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back. I stopped at the threshold. My hand curled around the doorknob. I didn't turn around. No, I whispered. You will. I walked out into the night. Heart pounding. Tears threatening. Not from sadness, but from disbelief that I had ever called these people my family. I thought that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. The real retaliation hadn't even begun. When I returned home, I found the door to my apartment sealed shut literally. The lock. The frame. The entire door had been covered in expanding construction foam. Hardened. Immovable. Malicious. Someone had done this with intention. With pettiness. My stomach dropped. I already knew. I pulled out my phone, opened the security camera app, and scanned through the footage. There he was, Parker hood pulled up, cap low, smirking as he sprayed the foam with theatrical flair. The timestamp was from an hour ago. My breath hitched, my hands trembling not from fear, but from rage. They had just declared war. The foam on my door wasn't just a prank, it was a message. It screamed, we still own you. We still have power. And the more I stared at the hardened white crust sealing me out of my own home, the more I realized how deep their delusion ran. They didn't just want money. They wanted submission. They wanted the old Sophia, the one who would laugh it off, clean it up, and wire them $1. $0, just to smooth things over. But that Sophia was gone. I pulled out my phone, took clear photos, then opened my security camera app and replayed the footage again. Parker wasn't even trying to hide it. Same gray hoodie. Same lazy poster. He looked amused. Like he was 13 and pulling a school prank. Except this wasn't middle school. This was criminal. I filed a police report within the hour. The officer who arrived was young, polite, but unsure. You want to press charges? He asked, flipping open his notepad. Yes, I said, my voice flat, eyes locked onto his. This isn't a family disagreement. This is harassment. He nodded slowly, writing down every word. When he asked for Parker's relationship to me, I said it without flinching. Estranged. Used to be family. The next morning, my father called. I ignored it. Then the voicemail came, Sophia. Sweetheart. Don't let this escalate. Parker didn't mean any harm. He's just upset. I scoffed aloud. He sabotaged my apartment door with industrial foam and my father called it a tantrum. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "What do you want?" "Dad," I asked. No warmth in my voice. He sighed. Already defensive. "Can we not do this? It's getting out of hand." It got out of hand the moment you taught Parker there are no consequences. Silence. Then he asked, "What would it take for you to drop the charges?" My lips curled into a half smile. $33,000. "What?" he hissed. "Are you extorting your own family?" "No." I replied, calmly. "I'm billing them. That's for door repairs, legal fees, and emotional damages. I'm being generous." He stammered. Tried to bargain. Failed. "You're tearing this family apart." "Sophia," he muttered at last. "No," I said, voice like steel. "You did that when you decided my labor was love." 3 days later, the transfer hit my account. From their joint account. No apology. Just cold, clinical money. It wasn't about the cash. It was the symbolism. For the first time in their lives, they had to pay me to make something go away. They had to acknowledge, even in silence, that I wasn't someone they could steamroll anymore. But I knew my family. They weren't done. Not really. When they couldn't manipulate me directly, they pivoted to the one thing they had left: public image. Within a week, I started getting messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years: old neighbors, church acquaintances, even college classmates I barely remembered. The narrative was already spreading that Sophia Lane, the cold daughter, had turned on her aging parents, cut off all support, and left them destitute after all they'd done for me. My mother had weaponized shame. I opened Facebook and saw a post from a distant cousin. Some people forget where they came from the moment they taste success. Sad. I didn't need to guess. I could see her fingerprints all over it. This was a tactic I recognized. My mother had always been the master of selective storytelling. When I was 16 and locked myself in the bathroom to cry after she screamed at me for gaining weight, she told everyone I was moody. When she used my savings to fix the roof without asking and I confronted her, she told relatives I was selfish. This was the same playbook, just on a larger stage. So, I made my move. I opened my laptop, typed out a post, and told the truth. Not the emotional parts. Not the betrayal. Just facts. Numbers. Receipts. Dates. I listed every expense I'd paid on their behalf: mortgage, tuition, utilities, renovations. I attached redacted bank statements, masked amounts, and a photo of the Tahoe villa I had renovated for them with my own money. Then I wrote, "I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for the truth to exist somewhere other than their mouths." I hit post. Within 2 hours, it had over 1,000 shares. Some praised me for standing up. Others shamed me for airing family laundry. But I didn't care. Because for once, I wasn't letting them control the story. I was telling it myself. That night, my mother called. I picked up. She was livid. "You embarrassed us," she hissed. "You made us look like monsters." I stayed calm. "You did that yourselves. I just turned the light on." She sputtered. Then said something that almost made me laugh. "You'll regret this." "No," I whispered. "You will." 3 months passed. Silence. No more calls. No more guilt trips. The absence of chaos felt like peace. And also like mourning. I'd lost a family. Yes, but one I had never truly belonged to. I focused on work. Finally had the time and funds to take care of myself. I signed up for a photography class. I started jogging again. I booked a trip to Paris. For the first time, every dollar I earned was mine. Every decision I made was mine. And the weight of invisible debt, emotional and financial, was off my back. But then came the final twist. Word spread that my mother had taken a job at a local diner. No more spa days. No more lunch outings with her country club friends. My father, once so stoic and removed, was now a store clerk at a supply warehouse. Olivia, still chasing influencer fame with no budget and no sponsors. Parker jobless. Their empire had crumbled. And I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. But one question still haunted me. Why did they do it? Why did they leech off me? Even when they saw the cracks forming in my smile, the exhaustion in my eyes, why did they never once say thank you? That answer wouldn't come from them. It would have to come from me. Because people like them don't see empathy as a virtue. They see it as a weakness to exploit. I used to think love meant giving everything. Now I knew better. Love meant boundaries, respect, reciprocity, and sometimes, love meant walking away. Even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. That night, I stood on my balcony, wine in hand, watching the lights flicker across the city. My phone buzzed with a notification, a comment on my old post. Thank you for this. I thought I was the only one. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't feel alone. I felt powerful. I felt free. But freedom comes with its own price. And as I took one last sip of wine, I knew this story wasn't over yet. 3 months of silence felt like healing. Or so I thought. I had rebuilt routines, reclaimed my mornings. I learned to enjoy solitude without bitterness. I'd started traveling not as an escape but as a form of reconnection. With the world. With myself. I wandered the cobblestone streets of Paris. Drank espresso in Rome. I felt wind slice through my jacket at the peak of Machu Picchu. Each place became a bookmark in the story of who I was becoming, someone untethered. Someone whole. But peace has a way of attracting chaos. It's like the moment you stop checking the rearview mirror. The past speeds up behind you, ready to slam back in. It began with a message. A polite, cold, professional email. The subject line, estate review and contest. It was from a probate attorney representing Olivia. My jaw clenched as I read through the contents. Olivia and Parker were contesting the original will. Not to reverse the decision. Of course, they still wanted to inherit everything. But they were accusing me of unlawful interference and defamation that had compromised family integrity and assets. I almost laughed. They were suing me for telling the truth. My post hadn't just gone viral. It had made rounds in our hometown. Their church saw it. Their social circles saw it. Even Parker's last failed startup investors had forwarded it among themselves. And now they were desperate. Grasping for control in the only way they knew, weaponizing the system. I met with my own lawyer the next day. A woman named Karen Monroe. Sharp as broken glass and twice as cutting. She read the email. Eyebrows arched. And then said, "They don't have a case. But they're counting on wearing you down emotionally. Not legally." I nodded. Grateful but weary. They want to drain me. Karen smiled thinly. Let them try. But this wasn't just about a legal nuisance. It was about Parker and Olivia trying to claw back relevance. They couldn't stand being irrelevant. And worse, my mother had joined them. A sworn affidavit with her signature confirmed it. She was backing their claim, stating that I had manipulated public sentiment and fabricated narratives for attention. My throat tightened. This wasn't just legal. It was personal. Again. The day of the first court hearing, I arrived early, dressed in black slacks and a beige blazer. Simple, clean, unemotional. My hands didn't tremble as I gripped the file folder, but inside my stomach churned. Not from fear, but from recognition. Recognition of the girl I used to be. The one who used to tremble in her seat at family dinners. Whose heart pounded when her mother raised her voice. Whose only rebellion was silence. Not today. Today I would speak. And they would listen. My attorney tore through their claims methodically. My bank statements. Screenshots. Payment logs. All backed up. All factual. She exposed every contradiction. Every lie. Olivia's attorney looked bored. Parker avoided eye contact. But my mother, she sat in the gallery. Eyes fixed on me, not with hate, but with something worse, disappointment. Like I had ruined her performance. Like I was the daughter who forgot her lines. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. After the hearing, as we walked out into the hallway, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, already knowing who it was. Sophia, my mother said. Not Mom. Not in that tone. You could have stopped all of this. You're right, I said. Voice calm. I could have walked away the first time you asked me to cover the mortgage. The first time you called me ungrateful for saying no. The first time you said love was about sacrifice. And I was the only one bleeding. She opened her mouth. But no words came. Just a flicker of recognition in her eyes, and then denial took over again. We're still your family, she said flatly. We'll always be. Maybe, I replied, stepping back. But that doesn't mean you own me. The judge dismissed their suit 2 weeks later. Lack of evidence. Abusive process. Karen sent me a bottle of red wine and a single sentence in the email. Told you. I stared at the bottle for a long time before opening it. It wasn't a celebration. It was an exhale. But the damage had already been done. My peace wasn't ruined. But it had been cracked. And into those cracks, something new began to grow, not rage. Not revenge. But curiosity. What did they do? Once the last rope snapped, were they unraveling yet? Did they feel the emptiness I'd lived in for years? I didn't have to wonder long. The universe, as if craving closure, sent me an answer. I got a message from Jenna, a girl I went to high school with, who now worked part-time at the diner where my mother served pancakes to strangers who never knew she once led charity galas. Sophia, she wrote. I saw your mom today. She looked smaller, tired, not angry, just faded. That image haunted me for days. My mother, once so polished, with French tips and designer scarves, now wiping counters and scribbling orders on yellow notepads. But still, I felt no pity. Because the woman Jenna described had been built on the backs of her children. And when one child stopped kneeling, her tower fell. I let the message sit unanswered. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood that caring didn't have to come with sacrifice. I could care and still stay gone. I didn't need to witness their downfall. I had lived enough of their rise. And just as I started to breathe again, just as I allowed myself a week without reliving court transcripts or childhood gaslighting. The final twist arrived. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a knock. I opened the door. And there stood a man. Late 30s. Well-dressed. Nervous energy. "Sophia Lane?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, already tensing. "I'm Alex Carter. I believe we have something in common." I frowned, confused. "And what's that?" He smiled faintly. "We both walked away from families that tried to break us." I didn't answer. I just stepped back slowly, holding the door. Not in fear, but in recognition. Something in his voice, his presence, felt like an echo. The next chapter had just introduced itself, and I wasn't sure whether it was salvation or another test. Alex didn't push his way into my life. He didn't rush or pry or pretend to understand me after a single conversation. And that's how I knew he was different. He showed up with stories instead of demands, with questions instead of assumptions. We met again for coffee a few days after that first strange encounter at my door. He told me about his family, different city, different script, but the same performance. A mother who twisted guilt into a leash. A father who watched from the sidelines. A sibling who learned early how to weaponize victimhood. For the first time, I didn't have to explain my pain. He already spoke the language. We didn't fall into love like a movie. It was slower. Quieter. It was a kind of healing you don't notice at first because you're too used to bleeding. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. Sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, he'd hold my hand and say nothing at all. And sometimes, that silence was the safest place I had ever known. The irony. All those years I thought family was about blood and obligation. But here was a man with no obligation to me at all, choosing to stay. And yet, even in those quiet months of growing roots and breathing freely, a part of me couldn't fully rest. Because the past doesn't vanish. It lingers. It echoes. One night, a full year after my family ambushed me with their will and their betrayals, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice was rougher, older. "Sophia, it's your father. Your mom had a stroke. It's serious. They're saying she might not recover." I listened to the message 3 times. Unmoved. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. But I didn't delete it either. For days, I walked through my life like a ghost. Cooking dinner with Alex. Walking to work. Sipping coffee. All while that message replayed in the back of my mind. Was I supposed to go back? Was I supposed to be the bigger person, or was I just afraid of being heartless? Alex didn't offer advice. He just asked, "What would you regret more, going or not going?" That question haunted me. Because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I owed her forgiveness. I wasn't sure if I could give it. But I was sure of one thing: I wasn't afraid anymore. So I went. The hospital room was quiet. Sterile. The machines beeped softly. She looked small. My mother had always been the sun burning, blinding, inescapable. Now she looked like smoke. Fragile. Almost transparent. My father was in the corner. Eyes red. Hands trembling. He didn't speak when I entered. He just nodded once. Parker and Olivia weren't there. I didn't ask why. I stepped closer. Not out of duty, but out of curiosity. This woman, who had shaped me with guilt and demands, did she recognize the cost? Her eyes fluttered open. We stared at each other. Sophia, she whispered. Not a command. Not a scold. Just a name. My name. I didn't know. She said. Lips barely moving. Didn't know what I asked. Voice low. That you could leave. Her words hit harder than any slap. Because they were true. She never thought I'd walk away. And part of me hadn't either. We sat in silence for minutes. Or maybe hours. I don't remember if we said anything else. I only remember standing up, pressing my hand gently to hers, and saying, I did. I didn't go to her funeral 2 weeks later. I wrote a letter instead. Not for her, but for me. I burned it. Watched the edges curl and turn to ash on my balcony. That was my farewell. Life didn't turn perfect after that. It turned real. I still flinched when my phone buzzed from unknown numbers. I still had nightmares, sometimes me back at that dinner table, choking on stew while Olivia smirked and Parker leaned back like a king. But slowly, those dreams faded, replaced by memories of new places, new people, new peace. 2 years after I walked away from the family that raised me, I stood in the backyard of a small cabin in Oregon. Alex and I had bought it together. The trees swayed gently. The air was cold, but not cruel. And inside that house, there were no lies, no debts, no roles to perform. Just us. Just quiet. I think about forgiveness often. Not because I owe it, but because it's a question that never leaves. I still don't have an answer. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the answer isn't yes or no. Maybe it's choosing peace. Even when you weren't given justice. Some people think revenge is fire. That it consumes, destroys. But I've learned that the most powerful revenge is living well. Living without their hands in your pockets. Without their voices in your head. Living a life where your love isn't currency and your presence isn't payment. Living like your existence is yours alone. So yes, I was cut out of the will. I lost a house, a lake villa, a family name. But I gained something far greater. My voice, my boundaries, my freedom. And if I could go back to that dinner, I'd do it all again. I'd walk in blind. I'd sit down. I'd let the wine glass shatter. And then I'd stand up. Just like I did, and walk away. Because sometimes walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you'll ever do. And sometimes the people who try to break you are the ones who unknowingly set you free. Story 2. My name is Emma. And for most of my life, I was the invisible thread holding my family together. Not the shining star. Not the favorite. Just the quiet backbone everyone leaned on, but never acknowledged. I'm 24 now. And for years I worked jobs that paid the bills but didn't earn applause. I didn't need the spotlight. I thought the simple acts of sacrifice and care were enough. I was wrong. I grew up in a typical suburban neighborhood in Ohio. A place where appearances mattered more than realities. My mother, Linda, ruled the household with a steady, silent pride that never quite softened into warmth. She was the kind of woman who expected everything to run like clockwork. And if it didn't, she found someone to blame. Usually, it was me. My brother Jason was loud and confident. The classic older sibling who projected success like armor. My sister Sarah floated through life, more interested in social media than responsibility. Meanwhile, I paid the bills, fixed the problems, and filled in every crack they left open. At first, It felt good to help. I was the dependable one, the adult who showed up. But over the years, the smiles faded and the gratitude dried up. My presence became invisible. My efforts invisible debts expected to be repaid with silence. At family dinners, my words were drowned out by Jason's booming stories or Sarah's constant complaints about how exhausted she was. Despite doing little, I would pass the potatoes, smile politely, and shrink back into the background because it was easier than fighting to be seen. One night, everything changed. The kind of night that feels like any other until someone drops a truth so cold it cuts through the fog of pretense. My mother, eyes fixed on me like I was an unwelcome stain, said softly but sharply, "You're just a burden. We'd be better off without you." No shouting. No drama. Just those words, hanging heavy in the air. Absolute and undeniable. Silence followed, thick and suffocating. No one defended me. Jason looked down, pretending the words weren't his mother's. Sarah buried her face in her phone. I sat frozen, feeling the floor give way beneath me. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I stood up quietly and walked away. Not to argue, but to leave. I went to my room, packed the few things I owned, and without a word, I left before dawn. Before closing the door behind me, I logged into the mortgage portal, our family's largest shared responsibility, and paused the automatic payments. I did the same for utilities, gas, water, and electricity. I wasn't angry. I was done. Weeks later, I stayed with a friend, picking up gigs to make ends meet. I avoided calls from home. My phone buzzed relentlessly, questions, accusations, pleas, but I ignored them. I checked the smart home app out of habit and watched the lights in the house go dark one by one. The house wasn't just empty, it was unraveling. The internet went offline. The security system fell silent. And the rooms that once held life now held only shadows. At first, I thought maybe they'd realize how much I'd been carrying. Maybe my absence would spark change. But as days turned to weeks, it became clear my family was unraveling, not because they missed me, but because they hadn't been prepared to stand on their own. Jason's social media exploded with frustration, long posts blaming others, complaining about selfishness and betrayal. Sarah posted sad stories from her car, wrapped in a blanket, pretending the collapse wasn't happening. Linda was silent, her pride too thick for apologies, too brittle for vulnerability. But I wasn't waiting for their recognition. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I had found a strange kind of peace in the silence, the distance, and the consequences of finally stepping back. Because sometimes, the hardest love is letting go. Sometimes, you have to stop carrying the weight that others refuse to share, even if it means watching everything you built slowly fall apart. And this was just the beginning. The days after I left were eerily quiet, yet somehow louder than the chaos I'd escaped. I threw myself into work, odd jobs, freelance gigs, anything to keep my mind busy and my heart numb. My friend's small apartment became my refuge, a place where I could breathe without the weight of unspoken expectations. But even miles away, the fallout from my decision rippled through every corner of my old life. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Jason, Sarah, and even my mother, messages that flipped from pleading to accusatory in a heartbeat. "Why did the mortgage bounce?" my brother texted one afternoon. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying with cold honesty, "Guess you'll have to manage without your burden." Silence was the response. No apology. No explanation. just a void where family support should have been. It was like sending a message in a bottle, knowing it might never reach shore. But I felt no regret. If anything, it was relief. I kept monitoring the house from afar through the smart home app I'd left active, watching the slow death of a place I once called home. The lights went out room by room, the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, until darkness swallowed the entire house. Utilities were cut off. Security cameras went offline. And the internet died. Each notification was a reminder of what I had been sustaining alone for so long. It hit me hard. This was their reality now. No safety net. No invisible guardian. They had no clue how to keep things running without me. Jason, with his loud confidence and bravado, was nowhere near as capable as he pretended. His sales job barely covered his car payments, let alone the mortgage. Sarah's so-called entrepreneurial hustle was a patchwork of part-time retail jobs and online gigs that barely scraped by. And my mother, she hadn't made a mortgage payment in years. Not since I stepped in, covering everything without complaint. Despite their negligence and arrogance. A bitter part of me wanted them to succeed to prove they didn't need me. But the reality was harsher. I was the glue. The unacknowledged glue holding the house and them together. The porch light was the last thing to go. I checked the app one night to see it flicker on and off repeatedly. Jason's desperation, pacing the steps, wondering where his stability had vanished. Then, finally, the breaker panel showed power completely cut. Gas followed. Winter was creeping in. No hot showers. No stove to warm the cold rooms. They were stranded in a shell of a house, unprepared and unknowing how to fix the damage. Social media became their outlet and armor. Jason posted a vague rant about selfishness and how family isn't what it used to be, garnering sympathy from casual friends who knew nothing of the real story. Sarah shared pictures of herself wrapped in a blanket in some parking lot, her captions dripping with fake sadness and zero accountability. My mother stayed silent. She held her pride like a shield, never admitting the truth that I was the only reason the roof stayed overhead. After that night, the night she called me a burden, I guess she thought I'd disappear quietly. And I did. The house began crumbling with me gone, both physically and metaphorically. They could have reached out, apologized, asked for help, but they didn't. Instead, they sat in the dark, wrapped in their own denial and helplessness. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just watched, feeling the weight of silence settle like frost on the windows. Sometimes karma is quiet, creeping slowly with no fireworks. Just the hollow sound of absence. Then came the final confirmation, a letter from the bank. I hadn't planned to check the mail, but curiosity pulled me back. I drove past the house early one morning, saw Jason shuffle to the mailbox, pulling out a thick stack of envelopes. He paused, reading one, his face draining of color. Notice of default. Final warning before foreclosure. I didn't smile. Satisfaction would have cheapened the moment. Instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me, relief mixed with detachment. This wasn't revenge. I hadn't sabotaged them. I simply stepped back and let natural consequences unfold. I had held their lives together for so long, they forgot how to stand on their own. Maybe they never really knew. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a new number. I let it ring out. A voicemail came minutes later, my mother's voice, fragile and cracked, like she'd aged a decade overnight. She didn't say sorry. She just asked if I could come home and talk. Not about the mortgage. Not about the utilities. Just to talk. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Because there was no home left for me. Not really. Home isn't just a roof over your head. It's how you're treated beneath it. And I had given everything I could only to be told I was a burden. So I left. And when I drove away for the last time, I didn't look back. After that final drive away, I carved out a new life piece by piece. It wasn't glamorous, nothing like the stability I'd built for them, but it was mine. A small studio apartment on the edge of the city. A part-time gig at a local bookstore. And late-night shifts delivering food. The routine grounded me. Each day, a step further away from the chaos I left behind. But the silence from my family was deafening. No calls. No texts. Not even a hint of concern beyond the occasional blocked number I ignored. I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. Relief that the toxic cycle had broken. Sorrow for the family that once was. Now fractured beyond repair. One evening, while shelving books, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was a voicemail from my younger niece, Lily. Her voice trembled as she said, "Aunt Emma, I don't know who else to talk to. Mom and Dad are fighting all the time. And the house feels empty. I'm scared." That small crack in the silence hit me harder than any argument. It was a reminder that amidst all the pain, someone still needed me. I debated whether to respond. Part of me wanted to shield myself, to avoid getting dragged back into the family's mess. But another part, the part I thought I'd buried, pulled me toward her. I called back, my voice softer than I expected. "I'm here. Lily. Tell me what's going on." She spoke in whispers about broken promises, late-night shouting matches, and the way her parents barely looked at each other anymore. The family I left behind was unraveling faster than I'd imagined. But here was a chance, a fragile thread of connection I could reach out and hold. Meanwhile, the bank had started foreclosure proceedings on the house. I received official letters, reminders that the home I'd kept afloat was now slipping away. I felt no ownership over the loss anymore. Only a strange sense of closure. But the worst blow came when I learned through a mutual friend that Jason had been telling people a twisted version of my story, painting me as selfish, ungrateful, even unstable. It was as if the truth had been rewritten to make him the victim. That stung. Not because I craved their approval anymore, but because I'd hoped my sacrifices had at least earned their respect. Instead, I was a villain in their narrative. The cause of their downfall, rather than the one who tried to save them. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I'd stepped away. This was no longer my burden to bear. But even as I vowed to move on, I started to notice changes within me. The anger simmered beneath the surface. A fire fueled by years of unspoken hurts. The injustice of being discarded like I was nothing sparked a fierce determination, not for revenge, but for reclaiming my dignity. I began documenting everything: bank statements, texts, emails, every instance where I'd held the family together and every moment they'd turned away. It wasn't about litigation or confrontation. It was about reclaiming my story on my terms. Late nights turned into planning sessions, sketching out ideas for a fresh start. I wanted more than survival. I wanted to thrive on my own. A business of my own. A life built on my terms. Free from the invisible chains of obligation and resentment. One morning, while sipping coffee on my small balcony, I felt a shift. The weight of years of sacrifice began to lift, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. But just as I was beginning to believe in new beginnings, a message from my sister shattered the fragile peace. "Can we talk? We need to fix this." Her words echoed in my mind. Was it genuine remorse or just a desperate attempt to patch what they'd broken? I stared out at the city skyline, the sun rising over endless possibilities and looming shadows. The question hung heavy: could I forgive and rebuild? Or was some damage too deep to heal? That question marked a crossroads. And I knew whatever path I chose next would define not just my future, but the legacy of everything I'd endured. The message from my sister, Sarah, lingered on my screen longer than I expected. Her words felt heavy with unspoken emotions, but also with a familiar tension I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I debated replying for hours, wrestling between the desire for closure and the fear of reopening old wounds. Finally, curiosity and a faint hope pushed me to type. "What do you want to fix?" The reply came quickly. "Everything. The family. Us. I know I was wrong. And Mom too. Can we meet?" We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe downtown, a neutral space where the noise of the past couldn't drown out our words. When I saw her sitting there nervous, tentative, I felt a flicker of the sister I once knew. Sarah's voice cracked as she confessed how overwhelmed she'd been. How easy it was to get lost in appearances while ignoring the pain we all carried. She admitted that Mom had become colder, distant, wrapped in pride and denial, refusing to admit the family was falling apart. As she spoke, I realized that the brokenness was deeper than I'd imagined, woven through years of unspoken resentments, missed chances, and fragile egos. The family wasn't just unraveling, it was drowning under layers of denial and silence. Yet, Sarah's tears were real. And so was her plea for a chance to rebuild. But could I trust that this wasn't just a way to pull me back into the chaos? I remained silent, letting her words settle like dust in the air between us. Later that week, I received a call from Mom. Her voice was low, hesitant, the proud matriarch now sounding like a stranger. "Emma, we need to talk. Please come home." That invitation stirred conflicting emotions. Part of me yearned for reconciliation, another part braced for the same cold dismissal I'd endured for years. But this time, I decided to go not because I was ready to forgive, but because I needed to hear the truth from her lips. Sitting across from Mom in the dimly lit kitchen, I saw a woman worn by regret and pride. She didn't apologize outright but spoke of fear of losing control. Fear of admitting weakness. She confessed that her harsh words were out of pain and frustration, not hate. It was the first honest moment between us in years. But honesty didn't erase the wounds. And I knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. Meanwhile, the financial fallout at the old house continued. Sarah struggled to keep up with bills, juggling part-time jobs and childcare. My brother, Jason, sank deeper into debt, his pride preventing him from asking for help. I watched their struggles from afar, torn between the urge to step back in and the need to protect myself. Then came the twist no one saw coming. A call from a local journalist who had caught wind of the family's story through a mutual acquaintance. She wanted to feature my story, a real account of sacrifice, betrayal, and resilience. The offer was tempting, a platform to tell my truth, to shine light on the silent struggles many families face behind closed doors. But it also risked exposing wounds I wasn't sure were ready to heal in public. I wrestled with the decision, knowing that once the story was out, there was no turning back. In the end, I agreed. The interview was raw, emotional, and cathartic. I spoke of being the invisible anchor, the burden my family never wanted to admit they leaned on. I shared how stepping away was not an act of cruelty but self-preservation. The story went viral. Messages poured in strangers who related to the pain, the betrayal, the quiet strength. For the first time, I felt seen beyond my family's judgment. But the backlash was swift. Jason lashed out publicly, accusing me of airing dirty laundry, tarnishing the family name. Mom distanced herself further, caught between shame and anger. The family drama spilled into the public eye, forcing us all to confront the fractures we'd long ignored. I realized that my decision to speak out had become another turning point, not just for me, but for everyone involved. The question now was whether the exposure would finally force change or deepen the divide forever. As I stared at my reflection in the mirror that night, I saw not just the woman who'd lost everything but the one who had found herself amidst the ruins. And I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. The aftermath of the interview was unlike anything I had prepared for. Messages of support flooded my inbox. But so did criticisms, accusations, and bitter family confrontations. The spotlight was unforgiving. But for once, it was my voice that commanded attention. Jason's public outburst was just the beginning. He posted a scathing response on social media, painting me as the villain who tore the family apart for selfish reasons. His bitterness was clear. But so was the fear in his words. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Mom, overwhelmed by the attention, retreated further into silence. The matriarch I once knew was now a fragile figure hiding behind a wall of pride and regret. Our conversations were few and tense, each word measured, each silence loud. Yet through it all, I stood firm. The pain of betrayal, the years of carrying burdens alone, and the courage it took to finally choose myself had forged a resilience I never knew I possessed. I realized this was more than just my story, it was a testament to anyone who felt invisible, unappreciated, or trapped by family expectations. But healing wasn't linear. The more I opened up, the more wounds surfaced. Friends questioned if I had burned bridges beyond repair. I wrestled with guilt over exposing family faults to the world. The freedom I sought came with an unexpected cost: isolation. One afternoon, Sarah reached out again, not through messages, but with a handwritten letter slipped under my door. She wrote about her struggles, her hopes, and the cracks she saw in all of us. Most importantly, she asked for forgiveness. Not just from me, but for herself too. That letter became a turning point. It didn't erase the past, but it opened a door, a fragile invitation to rebuild. Brick by brick, word by word, I arranged to meet Sarah again. This time with no expectations, just willingness to listen. We talked for hours, unpacking years of pain, misunderstandings, and unspoken love. It was messy and imperfect, but real. Meanwhile, I started to rebuild my own life away from the shadows of my family's drama. I pursued new opportunities, rekindled old friendships, and most importantly, rediscovered who I was beyond the roles they had imposed on me. The house, once a symbol of everything I sacrificed, was sold quietly. The money went toward my fresh start, modest, but mine. It was bittersweet to let go, but necessary to move forward. Months passed, and the echoes of family conflict slowly softened. Mom called once, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't apologize, but there was a tentative warmth in her tone that wasn't there before. A small sign, but a sign nonetheless. Jason and I exchanged brief messages, cautious but civil. The bitterness hadn't vanished, But the flames had dulled. Maybe time would heal what anger fractured. Looking back, the journey wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about reclaiming dignity and self-worth. About setting boundaries so that love and respect could someday grow in their place. I learned that family doesn't always mean unconditional support. Sometimes it means learning when to walk away to save yourself. The hardest love is often the love you give yourself. If there's one thing I hope anyone watching takes away, it's this. You deserve to be seen and valued not for what you provide, but for who you are. And sometimes, stepping away is the bravest form of love. As the sun set on that chapter of my life, I felt a quiet peace. No grand reconciliations. No dramatic finales, just a woman standing tall. Finally free. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Share your own stories below. Let's create a community where real, raw moments find a voice. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself. Story 3. My name is Claire. I'm 32 years old. And the night of my sister's engagement dinner, my place card didn't just have my name. It read, "The Failure." I still remember the sharp sting of that moment. The way everyone around the table laughed. Except me. I raised my glass calmly and said, "The kind of failure you learn to live without." No yelling. No outburst. Just a quiet exit. I walked out. Took back the car I bought her 2 years ago when her old Honda died. And canceled every reservation they'd planned for their honeymoon. That night wasn't a celebration for me. It was the final act in a long play of silent neglect and unspoken betrayal. What happened next? It was a reckoning no one saw coming. I hadn't expected a warm welcome. To be honest, I wasn't exactly the favorite child. But I showed up because I was tired of letting them rewrite the story whenever I stood up for myself. I was tired of being the invisible woman behind their facade of perfection. When I arrived at the restaurant, I noticed the subtle differences right away. Everyone else had those elegant, calligraphed place cards. Designed with care, best man. Future in-laws. Honored guests. Mine was a harsh, block-lettered insult, "The Failure." No one spoke a word about it. Instead, they laughed. My mom giggled behind her wine glass. My dad chuckled and said, "I always had a flair for drama." My sister, she barely glanced my way. Too busy showing off her sparkling engagement ring for the 100th time. Her fiancé smirked like this was the funniest joke he'd ever heard. I sat through the appetizers, pushing my salad around the plate, absorbing the endless stream of awkward toasts and forced smiles. My name never came up, except in a joke about dodging career goals like dodgeballs. The entire room erupted in laughter. Even the waitstaff exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly aware of the tension beneath the forced cheer. I raised my glass one last time, softly clinking it, and delivered my line, "The kind you learn to live without." Then I left. Silent footsteps fading into the night, leaving nothing behind but a space they were forced to acknowledge. Driving home, I logged into the car app I had secretly linked to the vehicle I gifted my sister. Within minutes, the car was remotely disabled, queued for pickup. I also canceled every hotel, flight, and excursion reservation for their honeymoon. They were toasting to their perfect future while I quietly dismantled the fantasy from the shadows. My phone exploded with missed calls, angry texts, and guilt trips. The best one: "You ruined her night." No, I didn't ruin anything. She did. With her coldness and indifference. I simply stopped pretending that it was okay. The voicemail from my mother was telling sweet at first, then ending with tears and accusations about how I embarrassed her in front of the good side of the family. She lamented how hard it was to defend me over the years, claiming my actions set me back even further. My sister's text was predictable. You crossed a line. We were joking. You've always been so sensitive. But she didn't know. Last night wasn't a breaking point. It was a finish line. Years of silent endurance. Of bending over backward to be accepted. All boiling over in one moment. They saw my job as boring. My lack of a partner as pathetic. And my quiet nature as failure. I was the family's scapegoat. The living joke and the car. That was the spark that lit the fuse. My father called my action vindictive. My brother, who hadn't spoken to me directly in months, messaged that I'd humiliated the family. The same brother who once forgot my birthday. Then tried to make it up by Venmo, requesting half the cost of his own party dinner. No one asked why I snapped. They were too angry that I finally did. But then came the quiet message from my cousin Natalie. The one who lives out of state. The one who rarely speaks up. No fanfare. Just 4 simple words. I held on to that message longer than anything else. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. Clear. And, finally, free. It was strange. Like stepping out of a noisy room and realizing how long the cacophony had drowned out my own voice. Let them unravel. By mid-afternoon, the family group chat was a courtroom, filled with accusations, guilt-tripping, and desperate attempts to mediate. Not one message asked how I felt. Not one acknowledged the place card. No one admitted anything was wrong. My mother's long message blamed me for overshadowing my sister's moment. As if mocking your own sibling in front of the entire family was somehow acceptable. Meanwhile, my sister posted screenshots of the canceled honeymoon, the hotels, flights, rental cars all gone. She complained about looking stupid online. As if I owed her a flawless Instagram aesthetic. The worst part, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly offered unsolicited advice about forgiveness and family unity. As if they'd never been the ones excluded or insulted. And then my dad. The man who once borrowed money from me without telling anyone. Called me hard to understand. Too literal. Never a team player. I didn't respond. I was done talking to people who only listened when I handed them something on a silver platter. That night, I drove the repossessed car home myself. The silence inside that vehicle was louder. More sincere than anything I'd heard at the dinner table. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of their expectations lift. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It was overdue. The morning after that night, I woke up to a dozen missed calls and 3 family group chats lighting up like a Christmas tree. Apparently, no one knew I had access to the back end of their honeymoon plans. They acted like I had hacked into the Pentagon. But really, I just logged in and pressed a few buttons. I paid for everything, organized it, and quietly canceled it. It was my money. My choice. My mom left a voicemail that started out sweet. I know last night got a little carried away, but ended with her crying about how I had humiliated her in front of the good side of the family. She said it was hard for her to defend me over the years, and that my stunt set me back even further. But this wasn't a stunt, it was my breaking point finally realized. My sister texted me accusing. You crossed a line. We were joking. Joking. That word hung in the air like a bad smell. She didn't know that night wasn't a breaking point, it was the finish line of a silent, long sprint I'd been running for years. They treated me like a punchline even while I was funding their lifestyle. My job boring. My lack of a partner pathetic. My quiet strength failure. The car I took back, that was the trigger that set everything on fire. It wasn't just about the money or the car. It was about taking back control of my own life. My dignity. My dad called my action vindictive. My brother, who hadn't spoken to me in months, said I humiliated the family. The same brother who once forgot my birthday and tried to make it up by Venmo requesting half the cost of his own party dinner. No one bothered to ask why I snapped. They were too busy outraged that I finally did. Then, a quiet message came from my cousin Natalie, the one who lives out of state. The one who never speaks up. 4 simple words. About time. I held on to those words longer than anything else. For the first time, I wasn't angry. I was calm. Clear. Free. Stepping out of the noisy room of their judgment felt surreal. It was like suddenly realizing how long the noise had pounded in your ears without you noticing. Let them unravel. By mid-afternoon, the family group chat had turned into a courtroom. Every message was a mixture of accusations, guilt trips, and desperate mediations. Not one person asked how I felt. Not one acknowledged the place card. No one admitted crossing a line. My mother's long message blamed me for stealing the spotlight from my sister's moment. As if mocking your own sibling at a formal dinner was anything but cruel. Meanwhile, my sister flooded social media with screenshots of the canceled honeymoon flights, hotels, rental cars, all wiped away. She complained about looking stupid online, as if I owed her a perfect Instagram image. The worst part, people who hadn't spoken to me in years suddenly gave unsolicited advice about forgiveness and family, as if they'd never been the ones left out, the ones insulted and used. And then my dad, the man who borrowed money from me without telling anyone, called me hard to understand. Too literal. Never a team player. I didn't respond. I was done talking to people who only listened when I handed them something. That silence was louder than any argument I could make. That afternoon, I took the car off their insurance. It sat in my garage. Spotless. A symbol of what I was reclaiming. The silence inside that vehicle was more genuine than anything at that dinner table. I started to think walking away wasn't dramatic, it was overdue. For 2 days, I ignored every message. Turned off, read receipts. Let calls go to voicemail. That silence was doing more damage than any words ever could. I could feel them unraveling. They were used to me smoothing things over, apologizing even when I was the one hurt. When I pulled the plug, quietly and cleanly, they didn't know what to do. My mom tried the soft approach again. She said the family was hurting, that this wasn't who I was, that I was better than this. Not one mention of the place card. No accountability. Just that I was letting emotions take control. My sister made a social media post thanking her real family for supporting her through the chaos. No names. But the message was clear. Half the comments were from relatives who hadn't even shown up to the dinner, praising her strength. A few liked old pictures of us together, like that was supposed to spark guilt. They don't realize I'm not angry anymore. I'm free. The money I spent on that honeymoon wasn't just generosity, it was me trying to buy peace. Trying to be useful. Trying to earn a seat at a table where they had already written me off. Taking it back felt like cutting the cord to a machine that only ran when I fed it. That day, I went for a walk, no phone. No notifications. No family. Just me. a pair of headphones, and air that wasn't filtered through anyone else's expectations. That quiet, that was mine now. A week later, the noise had quieted, at least on the surface. I think they finally realized I wasn't coming back. Not like before. No one apologized. No one owned their part. That was fine. I didn't walk away expecting closure. I walked away because I accepted what had been true for years. I was never really part of their family. Not the way they were part of each other. I spent years trying to prove myself useful. Paying bills. Staying quiet. Being the one who doesn't make waves. I thought if I just kept showing up, they'd see me differently. Instead, they got comfortable disrespecting me in new, creative ways. That place card wasn't a joke. It was a confession. They said out loud what they really thought of me. And laughed. They didn't expect a response. Taking back the car. The reservations. The money. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. I removed myself from the equation. I stopped paying for my own humiliation. Today, I closed every shared account I had with my parents. Changed every password I once shared with my sister when she needed help managing bills. Created a new email. Clean slate. I'm not blocking anyone. They can sit with the silence. The car sat in my garage a few more days before I sold it to a local buyer. The cash. It's going into a fund I started for me: vacations. Hobbies. Whatever I want. I've spent enough energy pretending to be someone they could respect. Now, I'm going to be someone I respect. Funny how one dinner can show you everything you've been refusing to see. They toasted to family. I raised a glass to honesty and meant it. Days passed, and the silence from my family was deafening. No apologies. No calls. Just an echo of emptiness that only confirmed what I had already accepted: my place with them was never real. But beneath the quiet, the storm was brewing. I could see it in the subtle shifts. The whispers in shared group chats. The carefully worded social media posts painting me as the villain. They tried to rewrite the story. To paint my actions as cold and selfish. But I knew the truth was far more complex and far more painful. This wasn't just a family feud, it was a reckoning. Behind their curated smiles and public displays of unity, resentment festered. My brother, once smug and indifferent, suddenly found himself drowning without the financial safety net I'd quietly provided for years. His fledgling business, propped up by loans I'd backed. I began to collapse as lenders called in favors I refused to cover. The payroll missed. Employees were let go. Quiet panic replaced his usual arrogance. Yet, no one dared admit how much they relied on me until it was gone. I watched from afar, a silent observer to the unraveling of the world I had once tried so hard to keep together. My parents put on their public faces like armor, smiling at church, posting nostalgic family photos as if nothing had changed, but behind closed doors, the cracks were growing. The house that once symbolized their legacy was quietly listed for sale. No for sale signs. No fanfare, just a ghostly reminder that the foundation they'd built on borrowed trust was crumbling. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the illusion of control they clung to was slipping through their fingers, just as I had predicted. Yet, as the financial fallout mounted, so did the attempts to lure me back. Phone calls flooded in, pleas disguised as apologies, promises of change, offers to meet and talk. But the damage ran too deep. I wasn't the same person who had once begged for acceptance or swallowed my pride to keep the peace. This time, I was in control. And I wasn't interested in playing their games. Every call I ignored was a small victory. Every unanswered text, a declaration that I was done with their lies. The turning point came when I made a final move that shocked everyone, a letter sent not to them, but to the boards where my parents held volunteer roles. Polite, factual packets outlining the financial support I had provided over the years, traced meticulously through bank statements and donations. No accusations. No drama, just cold, undeniable truth. The consequences were swift. My mother resigned from the school board. My father stepped down as treasurer, citing personal matters. My brother scrambled to launch a GoFundMe under the vague title Family Emergency, a desperate attempt to salvage a sinking ship. Watching them scramble was bittersweet. Part of me wanted to scream that I had done it all for them once, that I had carried the weight of their mistakes on my back. But the louder truth was that I had finally shed that burden. I was free. No longer their financial crutch. No longer the family's secret source of support. I had rewritten the script, taking back my power, one calculated step at a time. In the quiet moments, I reflected on everything, the years of being dismissed, the subtle slights disguised as jokes, the constant pressure to prove my worth, not as a person, but as a provider. The emotional toll was heavy, but it had forged something stronger in me, a clarity of purpose, a refusal to be invisible any longer. My silence was my shield, my withdrawal, a statement louder than any argument. The last message I sent to the family group chat was simple. You made this. No explanation. No apology. Just truth laid bare. And then I left. For good. The finality of that moment settled over me like a weight lifted. It wasn't hatred or bitterness that filled the space, it was peace. The kind that comes from knowing you fought for yourself, that you stopped being a pawn in someone else's story. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Because sometimes, when you cut ties, the severed threads snap back in unexpected ways. Whispers of betrayal turned into open accusations. Mutual friends picked sides. The community began to murmur about the family drama, each retelling adding layers of distortion and pain. My name was whispered in judgment, my motives questioned by those who saw only what they wanted to see. Yet, amidst the chaos, a surprising ally emerged. Natalie, my cousin, who had quietly observed from afar, reached out. Her words were few but sincere. I've seen what you've been through. You're not alone. That small connection reminded me that even in the darkest family battles, there are bonds that survive, that witness the truth beyond the facade. With every passing day, I built new walls around my life, not of bitterness, but of self-respect and boundaries. I focused on healing, on rediscovering who I was beyond the roles they assigned me. The car sold. The accounts closed. The social media silence maintained. I was crafting a future where I was no longer invisible, no longer the punchline. Yet, even as I moved forward, questions lingered. Would they ever understand? Would they ever regret? More importantly, would I ever forgive? Those questions remained unanswered, shadows stretching long into the future. But for now, I had reclaimed my narrative, and that was enough to keep walking away, step by step, into my own light. The days turned into weeks, and the aftermath of my withdrawal rippled through the family like an invisible earthquake. I watched quietly as the carefully constructed facade of their perfect family life started to crumble, not with loud confrontations, but through subtle shifts and exposed cracks. The engagement that was once a glamorous celebration became a backdrop for whispered grievances. My sister, once glowing with excitement, now seemed weighed down by the silence I left behind. Our family dinners, once filled with forced smiles and awkward glances, fell into a cold, uneasy truce. Yet, no one dared speak my name aloud. What unsettled me most was the growing sense of denial within them. They clung to the idea that everything was just a misunderstanding, that the drama could be erased with time and polite smiles. But I had dismantled more than just accounts and reservations. I had shattered their illusion that they controlled the narrative. For years, I had been the quiet anchor, the invisible safety net. Now, I was the storm they never saw coming. And storms have a way of uprooting the deepest roots. Behind closed doors, tensions flared. My brother's business, once fueled by my quiet backing, was bleeding fast. His messages, once cocky and dismissive, turned desperate and erratic. I knew he was scrambling to find investors, to patch holes in a sinking ship. But the truth was undeniable without my support. His empire was crumbling. It was a harsh lesson in accountability. One he refused to learn gracefully. Meanwhile, my parents wrestled with their own guilt and pride. Their public personas remained intact. But in private, cracks appeared. My mother's attempts to reach me turned from gentle coaxing to frustration-laden texts. My father, who had always been the stoic pillar, showed signs of weariness that only I seemed to notice. The house that symbolized our family legacy was no longer a sanctuary but a reminder of what was lost: love, trust, respect. In the midst of this unraveling, I found unexpected strength in solitude. My penthouse, once a silent refuge, became my sanctuary. I spent long hours reflecting, not out of bitterness, but to understand the woman I was becoming. The pain of rejection was still fresh, but so was the clarity that emerged from it. I was no longer the girl who begged for acceptance or tried to fix everyone else's problems. I was a woman reclaiming her story, piece by piece. Yet, even in this newfound peace, the ghosts of my past haunted me. Memories of every slight, every insult, every moment I was made to feel less than, played on a loop in my mind. But I no longer let them break me. Instead, I used them as fuel, a reminder of why I could never go back. The silent strength that had carried me through years of invisible labor was now a beacon guiding me toward a future defined on my own terms. Then came the unexpected twist, a message from my sister. Not angry, not confrontational, but tentative. She asked to meet. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut forever. Another part wondered if this was the olive branch I had longed for but never received. We met in a quiet cafe, the air thick with unspoken words. She admitted she hadn't understood how deeply her family's actions had cut me, how blind she had been to my struggles. For a moment, I saw the sister I had wished for, a real ally. Not just a competitor for approval. But forgiveness was a journey, not a single act. I told her I wasn't ready to erase the past, but I was willing to start building something new. It was a fragile beginning, a tentative step toward healing that neither of us could predict. Outside, the city buzzed with life, indifferent to the small moments of reconciliation happening in a corner cafe. Meanwhile, the family's public image continued to wobble. Rumors surfaced about financial troubles, whispered accusations of mismanagement, and quietly severed ties. Friends distanced themselves. Social media became a battleground of half-truths and silent condemnations. The polished veneer of success was now marred by cracks too deep to ignore. I watched, detached but satisfied, as the consequences of years of entitlement and neglect unfolded. At home, I fortified my boundaries. New locks, changed numbers, digital firewalls not to punish, but to protect. I invested in my self-therapy, fitness, hobbies, long neglected. Each step forward was a quiet rebellion against the narrative that I was less because I was different. I was learning to love the woman I had become, scars and all. But the most profound change was internal. The anger that once burned hot had cooled into a steady flame of resolve. I understood now that my worth was not tied to their approval or their recognition. I was whole, not in spite of the past, but because I had survived it. That realization was my true revenge, a life lived authentically, beyond the shadows they cast. Yet, life's drama never truly fades. As I began to rebuild, new challenges emerged. Questions about trust, loyalty, and identity became the new battlegrounds. The scars of family betrayal left marks that would take years to fully heal. But I was ready, stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to write my own story, one that no one could rewrite or erase.